Yes, and good afternoon. Thank you for having me here. I'm very honoured to be speaking at this conference because I think it's very important for us. And I'm going to be talking to you about why, for WWF, food is probably the biggest issue we think we have, why we talk about sustainable diets, why we talk about food security, why we think pasta is part of the solution. I am going to lay out the problems. You've seen some of them. I'm going to discuss them. It's very depressing. I'm sorry. But we have lots of solutions and lots of optimism. But to start, an orangutan. This is why I do my job. I'm a conservationist. I've been working in the area for 22 years, and I got into them because of these creatures. They're amazing. They're also seriously threatened by palm oil, which is being grown in increasingly large quantities so we can have cheap food. And that's cheap food in every country in the world. It's the third most grown crop in the world. And that's terrible, in my opinion, that this chap will be threatened so we can have cheap food. And it's come home to me recently. I have a daughter. She's 11 months old. I love her to bits. And recently I found out that by the time she's 18, under business as usual, no orangutans will be left in the wild. And to me, that is unacceptable. And that's one of the reasons I'm doing my job. But globally, we need to look at what's happening to the planet. These are the planetary boundaries. And this is the limits we have of what we can use on the planet in a safe area. And as you can see, 3 of the areas are red and going beyond the green circle in the middle. Other areas are getting close to it. The 3 that are red are biodiversity loss, climate change, and nitrogen. All 3 are over the safe limit for us to operate in. Others are reaching it. All 3 are being driven by a food system as we work. The single biggest cause of climate change is not energy, it's not transport, it's food. Single biggest cause of biodiversity loss is food. Single biggest cause of nitrogen use is food. And the same for the rest of them. So it is a really, really, really big issue for us. But it's complicated. This is a deliberately complex picture. This is a map of the protein system. Protein is the problem, in my opinion. And as you can see, it's huge. It's land, it's seas, it's farms, it's insects, it's biodiversity, it's animal feed, it's food we eat, it's waste, it's big, it's complex. It's not easy for us to work on this, but somehow we have to look at the complexity and come up with something that's simple and easy for everyone to work on, to come up with solutions. So, framing food. A lot of people have different views on food. They either look at it globally or they think about it locally. Some people talk about it through the eyes of production. We need to produce more food. We need to produce 50, 60, 70, 80, 90% more food. Other people will tell you it's all about diet. We need to change our diets. It's consumption. We're eating far too much meat. We need to change that. Others say the solution is like food sovereignty. It's agroecology. It's organic food. It's local food. It's seasonal. Others will say it's industrialization. It's GM. We've done work on this. There is no silver bullet. Not a single one of them will work on its own. Organic is good. It's not the answer. Local is good. It's not the answer. Seasonal is fantastic. It's not the answer. Producing more food alone, well, we've seen what happens if we just focus on producing more food. All of these together need to be looked at to come up with a systemic answer that will serve globally and work locally. Because we have a big problem at the moment where often to supply global food demand, we're impacting on local food productivity, and that's happening particularly in the developing world. So back to this number you've heard earlier. I'm going to change it slightly. There are 7 billion people living on the world today, of which 3.5 billion are malnourished. Put it another way, 50% of the global population either has too many calories or doesn't have enough food. It's got to a crazy stage where you have some countries where you have the rural poor are hungry and the urban poor are overweight. And that's in the same country. You go to South Africa, you go to Tanzania, you go to Kenya, you go to parts of India. It's happening. So some countries are both suffering from overconsumption of calories and underconsumption. It shows how crazy the system is when this is happening. And I just want to remind you of that figure. It is 50% of the global population is malnourished in some way. 50%. And this is part of the problem. The way we look at food, we don't value it anymore. We don't treat it with respect. We've got all these things happening. And look how we've changed our food system. On this diagram here, you'll see 1950s America, portion sizes. A portion of French fries, 2.4 ounces. A burger, 3.9 ounces. A soft drink, 7 ounces. Now, in 2015, the average soft drink is 42 ounces. The average burger is 12 ounces. The average portion of French fries is 6.7 ounces. Look at that. It's crazy. Portion size is going up and up and up. And this is part of the Western diet. And it's a Western diet that we are selling to the rest of the world and is spreading around the whole world. It's not traditional. It's a new diet. Portion size is getting bigger. It's a new epidemic. And we're all seeing the problems with this. Too much meat, too much salty food, too much sugar. That's problems to the diet, problem to our health, problems to the planet. And this is what it's about, the current food system. We really need to look at the current food system. It's built on unsustainable production. This is not popular. Food is too cheap. It is far too cheap in the developed world. We do not value food anymore. And I say that because when people go to the shops, we don't pay the true cost of food. We don't pay everything it is. We subsidise food through farming subsidies and fishery subsidies. We also, I'm a taxpayer, I pay for those subsidies. I also pay for the costs of this food system, where in the United Kingdom, diet-related ill health cost the UK £20 billion last year. £20 billion, so about 25 billion euros. That's diet-related ill health. So I'm paying for the diet-related ill health, I'm paying for the subsidies to farmers, and I'm paying at the supermarkets. This is because we don't pay the cost of cheap food. We also don't pay the environmental impacts, so the cost of biodiversity, climate change, fresh water. So food is very, very cheap. We don't know the true cost. The result is waste, overconsumption, environmental impact, increasing demand of resource-intensive foods, which is a nice way of saying meat, malnutrition, over and under, reduced crops and livestock diversity. I will come back to that. But we do have the solution. And the solution is change production. It's been touched on. Let's move to sustainable production. Let's pay the full cost of food. If we pay the full cost of food, a lot of the foods which are better, lower impact and better for us, and for you, and the people in the pasta community, you should like this. It means that you'll change what you eat automatically and you'll go for the foods which are better value, better calories, better nourishment for you. You will not have a 16-ounce piece of meat at every single meal. You'll use meat as a flavouring. It'll go into your pasta, your rice, your couscous. It's a really good thing. And it will result in less waste, healthier people, healthier environment, change demand, greater agrodiversity, greater variety. And what I haven't put here, but we're now looking at, would be greater cultural heritage protection. So the first step I'm going to talk about as a solution is let's celebrate plant diversity and celebrate smallholders. At the moment, the top figure terrifies me. 12 crops supply 80% of our global calories. 12 crops. That's it, 12. And that, to me, is insane when we know that there's 30,000 edible species of plants out there. We rely on 12 crops. I recently heard that the average child in England couldn't name 10 vegetables. I challenge you all to name 10 vegetables later. And it's crazy, though, to me, that we've gone to a situation where we've got so much choice, so much variety, so much splendour, and 12 crops dominate our diet. And again, look at your cupboards. Do you eat breakfast cereal? A lot of that's going to be corn-based or rice-based, and we used to have a great variety of food for breakfast. I'm just saying. And the other thing is these crops are amazing. They come from around the world. Our system is not local. We have a global food system. It's an amazing food system. We're in Italy. Tomatoes don't come from Italy. Chilies don't come from Italy. Peppers don't come from Italy. They come from South America. Our food system is interrelated, but we've managed to interrelate it in such a way that we build on each other. We build on each other's learnings, the other crops that are out there, and create new cultures. It's always adapting and expanding. I find it very exciting. So, how do we get to a system that's sustainable? How do we get to a system that works and brings us all together? The first is through collaboration. It's no longer good enough to just be thinking about yourself, where you are, your own brand. We've done work on food security. Food security is a really trendy term at the moment. And for most companies, food security is security of supply. Making sure I can get the ingredients I need to supply my customers and to put my product on the shelf. That is one of the problems with the food system. It's only one part of food security. Food security is about so much more. We can't just rely on what we do for ourselves. We went out, we talked to 25 of the top global businesses, everyone from Aviva, the insurance company, to Unilever, we talked to Nestle, we've gone to lots of people, and we agreed that actually we need to start looking at a new way of doing things. We need to look at food security in terms of availability, security of supply, but we need a stable food system. We need how you use the food, how you use it better. We need to look at who has access to food, both global and local, and it has to be underpinned by being a sustainable food system so that when they all come together and they all work together, we can meet the challenges of food security, and we have to do it together. It's no longer the best way to do it on our own. We need to start working together with other people to come up with a sustainable food system. Very quickly, meat. Diet shift. We did some work a couple of years ago. Our concern was, how do we stop global deforestation? And we discovered it doesn't matter what you do in terms of protected areas, in terms of replanting forests, replanting trees. The graph on my right, your left, is what current trends are in livestock product consumption, so meat and dairy. If we carry on in that way, by 2050, we won't have any trees left or forests left. Say goodbye to the Amazon, that sort of thing. I'll put this into figures for you. Today, there are 20 billion chickens living on this planet. 20 billion. By 2050, there will be 30 billion chickens. And somehow we have to find room to space those 30 billion chickens and feed them. But our work also showed that if we shift diet away from these high-impact diets, away from the high-meat diets, to the other side, we contracted and converged. In the West, we ate less meat. In places like Sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, they ate more meat. If we did that and dropped our dietary intake by about 60-70% of meat, back to what we used to eat about 70, 80 years ago, we would have room for forests, and everyone would have room to have meat in their diet if they so chose to. So that's where we got to sustainable diets, and that's where WWF got to sustainable diets. We realised we have to work on consumption. We realised you have to look at diets in the whole. It's no longer good enough to look at individual areas. So what we have is the big pie chart there with the numbers on. That is the United Kingdom's government's own advice on what people should eat. As you can see, 33% should be carbohydrates like pasta, rice, bread. 33% should be fruit and vegetables, and then round the rest. We have an unfortunate situation in the United Kingdom where the other pie chart is what we're actually eating. So we're only eating 25% of our diet is pasta. 23% is fruit and vegetables, but we are eating twice the amount of protein and twice the amount of foods high in salt, fat and sugar than we should be for a healthy diet. And we looked at this and went, okay, which one is sustainable? So we've mapped the carbon footprint of both diets. And guess what? If everyone in England ate what the government recommends, it would result in at least a 25% reduction in personal GHG emissions from every person in England. 25%, it's huge. We're doing more work on it. It'll also reduce the land impact, the water impact, the nitrogen impact, the biodiversity impact of what people have. And we costed it. We got researchers to go out and say how much each one cost. And it turned out that if everyone ate what the government recommended, it's cheaper. Just a little bit, but it's cheaper. And we keep updating and keep checking. A healthy, sustainable diet for most people will be cheaper than an unsustainable diet. It takes more time. It means people need to learn to cook a bit more. people need to think about cooking. But another fact people don't know is that in England, most people say they don't have time to cook. But the average person in England is online or watches television for 4 or 5 hours every single evening. And the most popular TV programs, factual TV programs, are cookery programs. Bake Off. So what we're saying is that, but we haven't just done it for England. We did another project. We have done this same study for Sweden, for France, and for Spain. And in every single case, we found people are not eating the recommended diet. Most people do not eat the right amount of carbohydrates. They eat far too less for this fear that we've been talking about. Most people don't eat enough vegetables. Most countries eat far too much meat. And most countries eat far too much sugar. For all three of those countries, a shift in national eating guidelines would result in at least 25% drop in GHGs, in one of them 40% drop. I also know my colleagues in Italy have worked with the UN FAO and looked at the Mediterranean diet. And guess what? Mediterranean diet, sustainable diet as well. So we've done it now for 5 countries. I've just co-authored a paper, which is going to be published in a few months' time, on the Chinese diet. It turns out that a Chinese diet, in line with its traditional way of eating, would be sustainable. If it moves to a Western diet, it won't be. It's becoming a trend. My colleagues in South Africa are doing the same at the moment. I think it might have the same result. So what we're saying is it's possible to have a sustainable diet. It will be very good. It will be more culturally relevant. And in every case, it's cheaper. It is cheaper. So it's a diet that's good for people, good for the planet, and good for the pocket. And a sustainable diet addresses so much. It's biodiversity, it's cultural heritage and skills. It's really important. The moment the whole world is homogenizing, we're all starting to eat the same. The Western diet is taking over. You're seeing it everywhere. On street corners, there's Starbucks, there's McDonald's, there's all this sort of thing. A sustainable diet is almost the opposite of that. It's going back into what we all grew up. It's about equity. It's eco-friendly. It meets our nutrition needs. It's about well-being. It's exciting. It's what we cooked. My grandfather wouldn't recognise what a sustainable diet is. He wouldn't recognise what we're eating now. He wouldn't know half the food in the shops that he sees now. But he would recognise a sustainable diet. And my grandfather was a chicken farmer. So I grew up with a lot of chickens. Almost there. So what we've done at WWF is we have got these simple messages. I think they fit in with the pasta conference. I think they fit in with pasta. Eat more plants. Enjoy vegetables. Enjoy our alternate proteins. They are fantastic. We love plants. I love fruit. I love vegetables. Eat a greater variety of foods. It's simple. A greater variety of foods, because people are eating less and less variety. It's crazy that people in England often don't know how to cook even 5 dishes. And that includes throwing pasta at the wall. Waste less food. It's easy. It's a no-brainer. Waste less food. We all should do it. And that's not just people, consumers, waste less food. Every single part of the food chain, we should waste less food. I think when my daughter gets to my age, she's going to be sitting there and going, it was crazy how much food you used to waste. It was immoral, it was wrong, and you used to waste food like that. And she'll tell me off. She already tells me off. Moderate your meat consumption, both red and white. It's not good enough to just look at beef. Chicken is increasingly the problem. It's going to be the most eaten meat in the world very soon. In England, we eat about 1 kilogram of chicken almost per person per year. It's chicken, it's pork. It's growing so quickly. It is scary how quickly we are demanding more and more of them. Globally, beef consumption is going down. So we need to look at all meats. Buy food that meets a credible certified standard. This is important, whether it's seafood, so the Marine Stewardship Council, palm oil, where I started, the RSPO, very important. We need to look at palm oil, soya, sugar, etc. It's all there. And then eat fewer foods high in fat, salt and sugar. We are having an obesity epidemic globally. I think it's something important. So yes, our food system has moved radically. Our food system has moved very radically in the last 50 years. It's happened so quickly. When people say you can't change what people's eating habits, yes, you can. You can do it very quickly. And I can tell you all sorts of stories about that. It's not too late. I'm really convinced it's not. I think there's a huge role for looking at how we treat our food. I think pasta is a great example of something, an ingredient that can really bring food to life, and I think that fits in with this message very, very well. But back to my friend. I absolutely love orangutans. And as well as being pessimistic, they also give me an enormous amount of optimism. I've been fortunate, I've met them in the wild. It's why I'm going to do every single thing in my power to help them. But orangutans, there's two things you should know about them. One is the Malay people have a saying. They say the orangutan can speak, but he won't, because people will put him to work. And I believe that. And the other thing is this creature lives for about 60 years. It spends its day living in trees. It swings about, it plays, it's intelligent, it uses tools, it makes umbrellas, it makes a nest every single night. This creature, about 97% of its diet is fruit, plants, and insects. And it is one of the strongest creatures on the planet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Duncan. I didn't expect that at a pasta conference we would begin and end with an orangutan, so thanks for that. We've got a couple of minutes in hand. This might be a very unfair thing to suddenly ask you, because there's no reason why you should know, but you suddenly said beef consumption is going down. Mm-hmm. That surprised me greatly. I'm perhaps the only one, but do we know why?
There's not a lot of figures as to why, but it's just happening globally. We're seeing the rise of pork and chicken really are. They're growing exponentially, the cost-wise, the production efficiencies. But in a lot of countries, we're now seeing a drop in beef, and that could be the prices of it. But other than that, there's no real reason behind it. I've heard, one of the things I have heard is that people in the developed world are starting to question the efficacy of eating red beef.
Right, right. And just one other thing, unless again I heard you wrong, you said, I think, that the largest driver of climate change on the planet now is food. It's not transport, it's not energy. Mm-hmm. I wonder if you could just expand a bit on that.
Well, the latest figures for global causes of global GHG emissions, the food, which includes land use change, because food is the driver of land use change and deforestation, the food system, it's at least 30% of global GHG emissions come from the food system. And that's coming out of the UN, that's coming out of the IPCC as well, of which between 14 and 18% of global GHG emissions are coming from meat. So it's the big energy is in there, and it's the other big section of it, but food is now overtaking it. And some estimates are saying that, in fact, the way we're going, but business as usual, food is going to reach about 50% of global GHG emissions within about 15 years. And if we don't rapidly decarbonise the whole food system, we won't, even if the rest of the world goes to zero carbon in all its system, whether it's transport, housing, energy, we get all that to zero. If we don't change the way the carbon intensity of food alone, based on business as usual, will result in 2 degrees climate change.
Right, and a final point, pasta is good, you seem to be saying. Mm-hmm. Why?
We say pasta's good because, well, first of all, nutritionists demonstrate you need it in your diet, so a third of your diet should be pasta. We also, what we've been looking at is it is a low-carbon food. It fills people up. I mean, it's a very good food. I eat lots of pasta and keeps me going. I'm sort of a runner. But it's also, the other thing that's important about it is with people in recent years have moved to where the carbs are getting smaller on the plate, vegetables are getting smaller, and they say they're boring, they're dull. And the centre, the star of the show is often meat or fish. And in fact, if you look at it, things like pasta are really good at adding meat for flavouring, getting plants in there, getting sauces in there, and making a really tasty, exciting meal. And for us, that's exactly what it's about. It's about the cultural importance of it. It's about having a food that's filling, that's tasty, that's also going to be a lower carbon food.
Thank you very much. Well, Duncan didn't expect to be speaking today, and he probably didn't expect to be cross-examined by me either. So, Duncan, thank you so much on the WWF. Thank you. Thank you.